2020 has been a weird year for movies. The year had an okay start with a handful of movies that had an in-theater release, but unless you live under a rock or in Greenland or something, I'm sure you've seen that the vast majority of movie theaters have been shut down for a while. And with movie theaters shut down or struggling, many planned releases have been hugely affected. Some movies were delayed and others did an at-home release. As an avid moviegoer myself, I have definitely felt the void left by the movie theater experience and have been desperately trying to fill it. There have been a few movies that were pretty good, but for the most part I found most of the things being released pretty mediocre. Recently, I heard about a small, low-budget sci-fi film released on Amazon Prime, The Vast Night. With first-time director Andrew Patterson and a budget of under $1 million, I didn't really have much reason to watch it. Honestly, I really only watched it because it was a sci-fi, but boy am I glad I did. But before I get into it, if you enjoy movie analysis or breakdowns, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to help this channel get going a little bit. With that said, let's begin. The film really blew me away, from its camera work to its long takes to its inventive new look on the classic alien invasion. Basically, this film takes place in a small town as two teens discover an otherworldly phenomenon through their radio station. The tone is really reminiscent of the Twilight Zone. In fact, at the beginning of the film, we slowly zoom in on an old-timey TV displaying the words Paradox Theater, and then the episode title, The Vast Night. This whole thing isn't just supposed to feel like an episode of the Twilight Zone, it's pretty much a direct parody. This is just a nice little detail, but it is also one of the many that shows how great this film is. You see, when creating a sci-fi film, and more so alien films, there are a lot of things you have to get right and balanced. There are basic rules that need to be followed in order for the film to work. And though bringing a new and creative take on these elements can make one of these films so much greater, like Denis Villeneuve's Arrival, where the aliens actually do come in peace and want to help the human race, some films can be amazing just by going back to the basics. It's not very often you see a film, especially a sci-fi, that doesn't have a bunch of overcomplication in the hopes of being unique and just goes back to the simple elements that made sci-fi great in the first place, bringing just enough originality and charm with it. Another thing that helped elevate this film from the world of mediocrity and tropes was the way it handled its world building. Now, that term is mostly used to describe when a storyteller creates a whole universe with its own technologies, cultures, or even scientific laws or something, but I mean this in a more grounded way. Just the way it introduces us to this small town in New Mexico in the 50s. Let's start with the beginning of the film. We open up on one of our main characters, Everett, at a high school basketball game. Through the sequence, we also see that he runs a local radio station and does interviews. We then meet the other main character, Faye, and they do some small interviews of some local folk. Just hearing a family's opinion on something as simple as a squirrel getting into the high school gymnasium is a great way to show us what type of town this is and what type of characters occupy it. A small, tight-knit one with people who have simple views on life and everyone knows each other. There's also one of my favorite parts of this film, which is a long sweeping shot that moves through the whole town. These are easily the most visually pleasing parts of the film, but it also serves as an important part of the story, which is when we really get a closer look and start to get to know this town. Accompanied by that amazing technical achievement of long shots is long takes. These unknown actors give surprisingly solid performances in takes up to 10 minutes long. You don't have to be an expert on film to know that it'd be really hard to get a consistently good performance for this long from any actor. These long takes also nicely complement the time aspect of this movie because the majority of this film is in real time. To see both of these things in action, we can take a look at one of the best shots of the film. The scene starts off with Faye lighting a cigarette in her doorway. Then we start down this long tracking shot through the whole empty town. Into the gymnasium with all the people. Through the bleachers. Out the window. Then to the radio station. This would not only be challenging with the camera department's part, planning routes, handing off between camera cars to cameramen, going through crowds and windows, but also for all those actors too. Now, the last thing I wanted to talk about was the use of radio in this film. The radio is cleverly used to propel our characters through the story and also adds a slight mystery feel to the film, as many of the plot points come from our characters discovering the story through interviews over the air. My favorite part of this film actually comes from one of those interviews. Somewhere around the beginning of Act 2, a caller calls in with information about the strange sounds coming from the sky. This is definitely when we see the film at its best. A simple radio story is turned into a mesmerizing experience, and when I watched it, I truly just got lost in the scene. This environment is created by simple editing and directorial choices. The scene starts with Everett answering the call. We then meet the old vet, Billy, but only by his voice, and Everett asks him some questions to see what this guy has to say. But then things start to get really good, as when Billy starts to dive deeper and uncover this mystery, the shot stays steady on Everett's reaction for a moment. We then fade to black and are left with just the sound of this vet and his mysterious story being uncovered.
Wait, I'm sorry here. You're gonna have to be clear. Is this sound a military sound?
That's what we asked this guy at Walker.
And what did he say?
He said it wasn't military. It wasn't military from any country. It was coming from thousands of feet higher than anything could fly.
We then fade back to Everett and see his curiosity and intrigue mirroring our own. And although this may be the best part of the story, the filmmakers also cleverly use this part of the film to comment on important topics like racism and government secrecy, while everybody is so involved in this moment. These creative choices work so well and are just some of the countless examples that made this film such a compelling and submersive experience. That's all for this video. Thank you for those who made it this far. Hopefully I got my points across effectively and maybe learned something. Like I said in my last video, this channel is mainly to teach myself about the films I love by teaching others. Thanks for watching.